Who's that?
I forget. We brought a lot of the similar-minded folks to their community too.
Yeah. Joe, I'm just wondering. Ustadh Fouad, are we okay to sit on these?
Yeah. Please, and those too. Alhamdulillah. So very nice to see everybody again. And it's good to be back after a little break. Actually, we didn't really go on a break. I was still going, but it was remote from a hotel room, which is really weird. So forgive me for my absence. I was just telling someone I'm not a big fan of traveling. Like I used to be when I was younger. I feel like traveling was really fun. It's just not fun anymore, right? Like I don't know, it's just me. And I also, having little kids around, so it's a little crazy for me to try to leave. Alhamdulillah, it makes you, distance makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. So the majlis, I miss the majlis dearly, being gone.
This is good, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. All right, let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Allahumma ya munawwir ya fattah. نور قلوبنا بنور معرفتك وافتح لنا أبواب حكمتك وانشر علينا خزائن رحمتك إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وإخلاصا وصدقا في الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وصلى اللهم وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin in the name of God Almighty. We beseech Him to send His peace and blessings upon our beloved Master and Prophet Muhammad and upon his family and his companions and upon all of those who walk in his path of excellence until the last day. Alhamdulillah, we're on the last section of Imam Al-Ghazālī's beautiful text known as Bidayatul Hidayah, the beginning of guidance. And we went through the second section of the text, which is where we started, looking at the aqwal, one can say, or al-qawlu fi ijtinab al-ma'asi, on refraining from disobedience, which gave us insight into our understanding of spirituality. Like, what does Islamic spirituality mean? What tradition are we actually taking it from? What are the frameworks and foundations by which we understand that? Which then brings us into an understanding of that which we are seeking to try and eradicate or excavate or get rid of from within ourselves. So character qualities like jealousy and greed and envy and hatred and all of those types of things, we're trying to get rid of that. And we're trying to inculcate, bring in to ourselves character qualities like beauty and excellence and humility, being humble, serving, loving people, so on and so forth. And so from there, Imam Al-Ghazālī then begins to talk about a number of different aspects, both outward and inward, that we're supposed to try and achieve in this spiritual cultivation. And then from there, he looks at the last section, which is the section that we're now on, which is the etiquette of companionship with the creator and with the creation, right? This is the adab of as-suhbah. So what are the character qualities or manners that we should have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then by extension, What are those character qualities that we should have with people? And he talked about in the first few sections, the etiquette of one's relationship with God, and then the etiquette of the scholar, the etiquette of the student, the etiquette of the child with his parent. And now we're on the last section, which is going to get into the categories of the rest of the people that you would have relationships with. And he says that they are your friends, i.e. the asdiqa, like people that you're actually close to, companions, your brothers and sisters that you actually keep company with and you're very close to. And then your acquaintances, people who you see, but you're not really all that close to. And then people that you don't know. So he begins with the people that you don't know. He says, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا بعلومه وعلمكم في الدارين آمين المجهولين, the people that you don't know. فإن بليت بالعوام المجهولين فأدب مجالسة العامة ترك الخوض معهم في حديثهم وقلة الإصغاء إلى أراجيفهم. So when you're tested with people that you don't know of the general public, the etiquette of sitting with them entails avoiding getting involved in their conversations or in their discussions. And then he says, not paying too much attention to their disquieting talk. And then disregarding what follows on from the bad things that they say. Being wary of meeting them with too often or getting into a position where you're in need of them. And then calling their attention to their blameworthy actions with gentleness and sincerity when there is hope that they will actually accept what it is that you say. So it's interesting. People that you don't know, that you don't have a relationship with, it's a lot easier for you to begin to control how you're going to actively engage in that relationship or not engage in that relationship. You know, what Imam Al-Ghazālī is really trying to get us to call to mind here is that we're going to befriend people through our lives. And those people are people that we need to be very conscious of who they are and how we're selecting them. So in the same way that, for example, people that have businesses, if you can imagine yourself having a business, somebody comes in for a job, you don't just hire anybody. Oh yeah, this individual came in, I'm just going to hire this individual. No, you want to know, can you do what needs to be done? And in certain positions that we have available to you in order for us to try and accomplish the venture that we're on. Is this individual going to fit or not going to fit? In the same way, we as individuals, particularly those who are spiritually conscious, moving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, need to be very conscious of the people that we're bringing into our lives. And so this is what Imam Al-Ghazālī is saying. He's saying, recognize who and how you are bringing people into your life. And he's going to give us some insight as to how that's going to work. So the first people, obviously, are people that you don't know. And he says, avoid getting involved in their conversations or discussions. You know, don't really actively engage all that much. Don't pay attention to the things that they say that are problematic. Disregard what follows from the bad things that they say. One can sort of sum it up by saying, don't really engage this relationship in as much as you're able to, right? And when you have somewhat of a relationship with this individual, or you built some sort of rapport, and you know that maybe they look up to you, maybe they're actively engaging you, wanting to try and be better themselves, and you feel like they would actually take the things that you have to say, then you can help them through some sort of gentle and sincere push to get them to do the things that you believe will actually help them, right? But I'm not really a person to give unsolicited advice, and I would advise people, you know, that that's probably not the way to go. Generally speaking, in the way of the mashayikh that we've hung around have always been people who more or less are just around for people. And they're not really talking or telling people what they should or shouldn't do, particularly the first time that they ever meet them. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to get them to give you advice after a year of being with them. They usually just help you figure out your own thoughts and move on from there. So these are the people that you don't know. Now, obviously, this is a very easy category, so he gets through it really quickly, and then he gets into the category of your brothers and friends. So now your brothers and your friends. So he says, and I'm going to try to move through it because I actually want to try to get through the text. So I may skip around on the Arabic and just go straight to the English on some of these. So he says, before entering into such a relationship, you must do two things. So he's going to get into these wazifatain, as he says, these two duties by which we have to understand in order for us to procure the type of friendship that we want from these individuals. So he says, أحدهما أن تطلب أولا شروط الصحبة والصداقة فلا تؤاخ إلا من يصلح للأخوة وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المرء على دين خليله فلينظر أحدكم من يخالل. It's a very famous hadith. So the first thing is to check for the presence of the requisite qualities of companionship and friendship. For you should not take as a brother one who is not fit for brotherhood. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, a person's religious life is only as good as that of his friend. So let each of you consider whom you befriend. If you seek a companion to be your partner in learning and your friend in the matters of your religious life and your worldly life, then look for 5 qualities in them. So Imam Al-Ghazālī basically is explicating on this hadith, one can say, of the Prophet ﷺ. So he says the first thing is al-aql. فَلَا خَيْرُ فِي صُحْبَةِ الْأَحْمَقِ. There's no good in friendship with a foolish person. For such a friendship will only end in estrangement and breaking off relationships. This person may even harm you while intending to bring you benefit. For an intelligent enemy is sometimes better than a foolish friend. It's a very interesting line here, right? An intelligent enemy is sometimes better than a foolish friend. In other words, an enemy, your relationship with them is quite clear from the get-go. And your friend, the relationship is clear. The enemy is someone who doesn't want good for you. And your friend, we can say, generally speaking, is one who wants good for you. So when you engage with a friend, i.e. someone who wants good for you, but they themselves are unintelligent, meaning that they're putting themselves in situations oftentimes that they shouldn't be or making really poor decisions, they're going to drag you along. And because they're your friend, you're going to find yourself in that situation. Versus someone who doesn't like you, doesn't really want good for you, but because they're intelligent, you're actually able to take something from that individual. If you see that relationship in that light, you're able to take from that individual something that is going to be of benefit to you at some level. So then he says, Ali, karramallahu wajhahu wa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu warda, Ali ibn Abi Talib says, and this is some of the lines of poetry that Ali ibn Abi Talib was known to have said. He said, don't befriend an ignorant person. Let both you and him beware. For how many an ignoramus has brought to ruin a gentle, forbearing man when he befriended him. A person is measured by the company he keeps, like one pair of shoes placed next to another. Everything is evaluated by comparison to its peer. A heart will reflect the reality of the heart it keeps company with. What do you think this means?
Can you repeat this?
Yeah, I mean, in the Arabic, it's really amazing too, but it's just for the time. You know, وَلَا تَصْحَبْ أَخَى الْجَهْلِ وَإِيَّاكَ وَإِيَّاهُ فَكَمْ مِنْ جَهْلٍ أَرْضَى حَلِيمًا حِينَ وَأَخَاهُ يُقَاسُ الْمَرْءُ بِالْمَرْءِ إِذَا مَا هُوَ مَا شَاهُ وَلِلشَّيْءِ مِنَ الشَّيْءِ مَقَايِيسٌ وَأَشْبَاهُ وَلِلْقَلْبِ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ دَلِيلٌ حِينَ يَلْقَاهُ. Don't befriend an ignorant person, let both you and him beware. For how many an ignoramus has brought to ruin a gentle, forbearing man when he befriended him. A person is measured by the company he keeps, like one pair of shoes placed next to another. Everything is evaluated by comparison to its peer. A heart will reflect the reality of the heart it keeps company with.
So basically, you want to be something.
Yeah. Right. When you think about the analogy of the shoe, you know, you don't have one shoe, right? It's two. And as they say, if one of them is, what do they say? I don't know the new terminology, man. I'm getting old. Now you can tell I'm old. On fleek or whatever they say. If one of them is dope and the other one isn't, then it's going to tell. Like you don't see one shoe, you see both shoes, right? And as a result of that, it's going to bear a type of burden that the other one has, even though one may actually look really, really good. And so when you befriend someone, you're actually taking on their qualities, whether you like it or not. There's an aspect of simply your being friends with that person that then reflects back on you. And that's that last line. Everything is evaluated by comparison to its peer. A heart will reflect the reality of the heart that it keeps company with. I mean, think about that. And there's an internal reality to this as well. As they say, the believer is a mirror to the believer. Well, so too then would be the opposite, right? That someone who is really lewd in their character qualities also then mirrors the people that they're around. So when you put yourself in that type of company, you end up being like that. So then he goes on to the second one. Husnul khuluq, good character. Do not be friends with a person of bad character. That is, someone who cannot restrain his anger or control his desire. So that's what we mean here by bad character. Someone who cannot restrain his anger or control his desire. We talked about the two sources of shahwa, right? Or the capacities by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human being. So we have the intellect, which is the heart, and then we have the appetitive soul, or the appetitive capacity, which is that capacity that seeks to nourish itself through food, and then in sexual relations. And then you have anger, or the irascible capacity, which is the capacity that is sort of quick to protect itself in a kind of aggressive manner. Both of them are needed, right? And all three of them obviously are needed, but the two that we're talking about, the irascible soul, anger, and then the concupiscible soul, which is the appetitive soul, those are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in us as human beings for a reason. But if you don't control them, they're ultimately going to control you. And so someone who is of bad character, ultimately we would say, is someone who has lost control of those two faculties. He or she lets their anger get the best of them in every situation. Or they let their shahwa, their caprice, their passions, and their desires get the better of them in every situation. They don't have control over themselves. And this is part and parcel of the kind of chaos that we see in the world that we live in today. And the idea of a liberal society positions itself on the notion that we're able to be free simply because that which we wish or desire, we're able to fulfill. Like the human being has autonomy to do whatever it is that they want. Is that real freedom? Like, is it real freedom if you can't yourself be free of yourself? And that would be what the Islamic intellectual tradition would try to push. So how free are you exactly if you can't control yourself? If you're a slave to your whims, to your desires, to your anger. And so, we would push the idea of liberty, but that idea for us begins with the self. It ultimately has to do with an individual who's in control of themselves, not simply able to do whatever he or she wishes to do. ألقم العطاردي, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him, summarized the traits of good character in the counsel that he gave to his son when he was near death. So he said, Ya bunay, O my son, if you wish to befriend someone, take as your friend a person who, if you serve him, protects and preserves you. If you spend time with him, beautifies you by his company. And if you're in financial need, provides for you. Take as your friend one who, if you extend your hand towards something good, assists you in it. If he sees you do something good, appreciates and remembers it. But if he sees you doing something bad, stops you from doing it. Take as your friend one who, when you say something, believes you. When you attempt something, accepts your leadership. And if you should dispute about something, prefers you to himself. This is a really beautiful counsel. Again, this whole section is something that I'm going to ask all of you who have the text to go through over and over and over again. This should really be like mandatory reading for us here at the Majlis too. Like all of us need this reminder. Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said in a poetic form, verily your true brother is he who is really with you, who will harm himself in order to benefit you, and who, when the troubles of the time break you, will shatter himself to pieces in order to gather you together. I mean, this really brings out a lot in terms of what it means to befriend someone who has good character. Well, like one of the first times that I saw this actually was in my going overseas. I won't say the country, but you probably all know what country I'm talking about anyways. And I saw this quality in the people of religion. Like sometimes you'll find it in different communities in general, but alhamdulillah that I found it in the people of religion. Because, and I'll never forget this, but I needed a lot of money in order to get out of a particular situation that I was in. And this individual that I was with, who at that time was more or less kind of pushing me towards the direction of religion, said, yeah, I got you on that. And it was a large sum of money. We were talking like $15,000, something like that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I have money in my savings account. I'll just give it to you. Mind you, I've known this person maybe a year. I said, you give me $15,000? He said, yeah, it's not a problem. I know. I mean, that's what we do. And he gave me the money. I took the money and I did with it what I needed to do. There's like transactions that needed to happen, selling something, car, whatnot. And he gave me the money, and he allowed me to sit on it for a few weeks, like I had told him. And then I gave it back. Alhamdulillah. But just the very idea of someone who knows you for that long to give you that much money. I know family members were like, no, man, I don't got the money. And you know that they have the money, right? Or someone, for example, who stays up the entire night in order for you to get from point A to point B so that you can catch your flight. And then, make sure that the people that are going to receive you are going to receive you properly, and stays up an additional day in order for them to receive you properly, and all these things. I mean, like the types of things that you see from people in this manner makes you very conscious of who they really are. And so Imam Al-Ghazālī is saying those are the people to befriend. And Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu is giving it to us in poetic form, right? Like this is the person that you should find. And when you find them, befriend that person. So that's the section on good character.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we were talking about being in a gathering of, good people and have good character, what if you're friends with all these people and then one of your friends brings like someone new, right? And they don't have good character. What do you do in that?
Well, we can see what Imam Al-Ghazālī is going to say here. But I mean, generally speaking, everything that the spiritual tradition wants to try and cultivate within us can be summed up as wisdom, which is the reason why many people actually called it just the wisdom tradition for a very long time. In other words, how do you deal with a particular situation in which over time, through beauty and good counsel and excellence and wisdom, obviously all of that would be wisdom, but ultimately wisdom allows you to procure benefit and expel harm. So that's the way that this tradition works. It's not trying to go after someone, doesn't have ill will, and it always checks itself. Like it's always trying to get you to think about well, is this person really that bad? Maybe there's something that I need to think about for myself, or maybe they're triggering me for a particular reason. And so it gets you to be a little bit more introspective in everything that's happening to you in your life. Because what we'd ultimately say that it's all a manifestation of what's inward. Everything that you're seeing at some level, when you connect it to theology, you know, this is where like the mind explosion emoji, right, should go off, because you begin to realize that, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one creating everything in every moment of my life, then it means that even this particular situation that I don't really like all that much is also coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that there's something in it for me. Like there's something I'm supposed to get here. Right? So that becomes somewhat reflective of the way that they also try to work through this particular issue. But we'll see. I mean, he'll give more insight into this. The third is as-salah. As-salah, uprightness, not Muhammad Salah. Although we can also talk about Muhammad Salah too. Are you Liverpool fans?
Awesome.
No?
Awesome.
Oh my God. Arsenal? Really?
Yeah.
I have a cousin who's like a diehard Arsenal. He might be watching. No, they're good. Well, they used to be, at least. So he says, فَلَا تَصْحَبْ فَاسِقًا مُصِرًّا عَلَى مَعْصِيَةٍ كَبِيرًا. Don't befriend a wrongdoer who persists in committing major transgressions, major sins. Because someone who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not persist in committing major transgressions. Like if somebody's constantly committing major sins, to tell that this individual is not an upright individual. And we're not trying to make a judgment call and like check the individual. This is for us to know who to hang out with and who not to hang out with, right? So he's saying, don't befriend someone who's constantly committing grave sins, because someone who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not persist in committing those sins. As for someone who does not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot be safe from his danger. Indeed, such a person changes as his objectives change. This is a really good point. You know, something that could have saved a lot of us a lot of time. Such a person changes as his objectives change. What does that mean? It means that when somebody is engaging in a relationship with you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we know, it's the most pure and sincere relationship that you can have, because it's not them trying to attain anything out of that relationship for themselves per se. And obviously there are gradations in the way in which we would engage on that level. And we're ultimately all trying to be like that, but we have, you know, minor defects here and there. But someone who is committing defects or transgressions, we would say, that are at the level of major sins and persistent in it. As you can note, I mean, he's saying it's not just happening once here or there. It's just something that's consistent in their behavior. It means that these are individuals who ultimately are enslaved by themselves. And we're talking about that lower self again. Someone who has completely subdued themselves by themselves or through themselves. And as a result of which, as they say, the relationship that they have with you at some level has to do with that. And so the minute that they see that that relationship with you no longer really feeds that part of themselves, they're off to the next thing. And he's saying such a person changes as his objectives change, where it's not persistent. It's not something that, you know, if somebody worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a kind of predictability in the way in which you would engage that individual. You know where they're probably going to be at certain times of the day, what they're going to be doing, what they're not probably going to be doing, so on and so forth. Versus someone who is simply engaged in whatever his whims or desires are telling him to do. That individual, maybe one day is telling him to do this, maybe the other day is telling him to do that. And so they're kind of all over the place. And as a result of which, maybe your friendship with them was something that they saw as a benefit to them at a particular stage in their life. And now that that aspect of who they are is no longer something that they're chasing something else that may not involve you anymore, and they're off. So be careful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to his prophet, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. Do not obey someone whose heart we have made heedless of our remembrance, who follows his inclinations, whose case has gone beyond all bounds. So you must be wary of friendship with a wrongdoer, for witnessing wrongdoers and their transgression on a regular basis will remove from your heart all sense of their enormity and make them seem insignificant. And that is a struggle that I would say we have to contend with as people living in the West. It's just a fact. When you see certain types of things in which you know and I know would never fly in traditional societies and within sort of the guidelines that the Quran and Sunnah place upon us, we may see them, when you're like walking on the beach or you're at a particular mall or whatever the case may be. You may see them and be very aware of them yourself, and you kind of keep your head down or you move on or whatever. But the more that you're there and the more persistent that is as a part and parcel of your lifestyle, it becomes normalized. And before you know it, you're not really looking at it in the same way that you did. So that's a fact, and we have to be very aware of this. It's also something that, for our kids, we have to be thinking about. So he says, this is why the crime of backbiting has become acceptable to people's hearts and is taken lightly. Because it just happens, and it continues to happen. And so even though people know, by the book, yeah, it's wrong, but everybody does it. So it becomes normalized. If people were to see a gold ring or a silk garment being worn by a religious jurist, they would strongly disapprove of it. Yet backbiting is a much more serious offense than that. What is he trying to say here? It's basically trying to say, when you see something from someone who's supposed to be telling you what the religion is, i.e., someone who you don't see publicly doing things that are wrong all the time. The minute that you see them doing something wrong, it becomes very apparent. You see what the sheikh did? He was wearing XYZ. Oh, did you hear what he said? This word. Why are you sort of very aware of that? Because this is supposed to be the person that's not doing that. Versus the people that are constantly doing that. And when you normalize any particular situation, it becomes something then that you seemingly just accept. Like it doesn't stand out. It's not apparent anymore. So that's what Imam Al-Ghazālī is actually getting at here. And not to bring up what everybody's talking about, but I'm going to at some level. I won't mention names and whatnot. Actually, I will. I don't care. I'm getting too old for this. So this whole Will Smith Oscar thing that just went down, right? Part of my struggle with it is that in a setting like that, it has become normal for people to make fun of other people in that way. Like the roast culture that they've created as like the intro to the very presentation of the show itself is what they do and what they've done for years. And people in that community have accepted it for years. Now one can say, well, he crossed the line. He did cross the line, absolutely. But in a certain sense, he crossed the line within a setting that would be removed from that particular position. You get what I'm saying? Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Like if he did that here, no doubt he's going to get hit. But if he did it at the Oscars in a setting in which people are waiting for him to come and make fun of everybody, and that's actually the reason why Imam Al-Ghazālī says, don't be people who have made a joke out of life. Like that's what ultimately is going to happen. Like boundaries are going to be crossed and you really don't know how and when, and people are like really hurting. I mean, when you see that happening, to me at least, I look at him and I feel like there's something else going on. Right? So, but anyways, when you normalize something, the boundaries become blurry. You're not really sure. Was this wrong? Was it not wrong? And why? Because that particular character or the act itself no longer is apparently bad anymore. And so the communities, in terms of, something that we should think about, the communities that we want to try to cultivate, they shouldn't be rigid and they shouldn't be stringent and they should be communities of mercy, but they should also be communities in which we preserve the ability of the community to be able to distinguish between right and wrong. Like it's very clear when you see something that is evil, like that's evil. And we're not trying to blur the lines there. We're not creating settings or cultures in which that could be something that somebody interprets one way and someone else interprets another way. Like, no, man. If you say something about my sick wife, stuff's gonna happen. And like the community should be very much on board, right? In terms of like what is right here and what is wrong here. But that's going to take an effort in the community to cultivate a setting in which those boundaries are clear. Does that make sense? I don't know if anybody else has something to say on that. It's like all over Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So like I had to say something. The absence of greed. Al-hirs. Do not befriend a person who is greedy for this ephemeral world. Like someone who is constantly after this world. It's just dunya, 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 dunya for them. Friendship with someone who is greedy for this world is a lethal poison, for human nature is designed to imitate and follow by example. This is also a really good point. Human nature is designed to imitate and follow. Like you're born following. Which is the reason why if you look at yourself and the types of things that you wear and the way that you walk and the way that you talk, it's typically going to be modeled after someone else. Even as original and creative as people as we are, we are imitative by our very nature. And so Imam Al-Ghazālī is saying, because we know that about ourselves, beware of befriending someone who's after this world, because you'll begin to inculcate the qualities that they inculcate. Indeed, one person's nature may take from another without even realizing it. So keeping company with one who is fervently attached to this world increases your own greed for it, while being with someone who has renounced this world will encourage your own renunciation of it. And again, take this and understand that there are gradations here. We're not talking about like everybody needs to go be a monk and like go live in a mountain somewhere or something. Like that's not, or that people are just completely unaffected by anything of the world whatsoever. Like there, people are at different levels, but ultimately we're trying to work to a place in which, like the world and what it has to offer is not our ultimate objective. We know that there is something beyond the world, and that is our objective. Number 5, as-sidq. As-sidq is truthfulness. They translated it as honesty. It could also mean honesty as well, but truthfulness. So he says, do not befriend a liar, for you will always face deception from him. He's like a mirage. He makes what is far seem near to you and what is near seem far. It's a really interesting analogy. You may not find all these 5 qualities existing together in those who are resident in the religious colleges or those present in spiritual gatherings, wal masajid, or in the masjid. So you have one of 2 choices. Either opt for isolation and solitude, in which you will find peace and safety, or keep your interaction with your friends proportionate to the level of these qualities within them. In other words, he's saying, look, these 5 qualities that we've gone through now, okay, i.e. intellect, good character, uprightness, absence of greed, and honesty, may not be things that you find in one person, and it may not be something that you find in a lot of the people, generally speaking. So if that's the case, and you're not really able to find a lot of people who have these qualities per se, then you have one of 2 options. The first one, try to be alone. opt for isolation and solitude. And he's saying like that's the most safe approach to take. Now, again, we have to read this and understand like Imam Al-Ghazālī is trying to create spiritual ballers, one can say. Like, he's trying to make you really, really conscious of this level of spiritual awareness. And that's not going to happen if you take this lightly. Just as it's not going to happen if you take any discipline lightly. You play sports, play soccer or football?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, if you play football and you assume like, yeah, I'm going to be a really, 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 really great player and, you know, practice whenever I feel like it, you know, run a little bit here and there. Like, I'm not going to kill myself though. Are you going to be a good player? No. Same goes for spirituality. Like, this takes work. And that's what he's trying to say. Like, this takes work. And so if you're really about it, then this is the way that you would do it. Now, obviously people, you know, when you read this, think about it for yourself in the way that fits your own life. And again, people are at different levels here. So, and that's okay. So he says, the first approach, isolation. The second approach, he says, keep your interaction with your friends proportionate to the level of these qualities within them, right? So you find someone who has a little bit more, a little bit less. You then sort of create a package, if you will, right, in relationship to how you are engaging these relationships. You know that with this individual, I spend more time, this individual, maybe I spend less time, and you're making a very conscious effort on how much time and in what places you're going to be engaging those relationships. This is accomplished by realizing that brethren are of three types. Now, here's a bit of insight, right, that he's going to go into. So he's going to give you a way of thinking about this, or a taxonomy by which you can compartmentalize all of these ideas. So he says the first one, أخٌ لآخرتك فلا تراعي فيه إلا الدين. A brother for the sake of your hereafter, so seek from him only support in religious practices. This is a person who ultimately is someone that you're journeying this life with on religious matters. And there is solely someone who, you know, you are friends with when it comes to religion. You guys are doing religion together. And then there's a brother for the sake of your worldly life. And so you should seek from him nothing beyond good character. So someone who you're doing life with, sort of like the daily grind, one can say, what should you expect from that individual? You should expect nothing other than trying to take from that individual good character. So if you're around those types of people in your life and you're able to take good character from them, that would be a really good position to be in. Or a brother who is simply agreeable company. Seek from him nothing beyond being safe from his wickedness and evil, right? So you begin to see like the taxonomy. Then he says there are three kinds of people. The first group is like nourishment. One cannot exist without it. The second is like medicine. One needs it from time to time. And the third is like an illness. It's never needed at all, yet the servant may be afflicted by it. Such people provide neither benefit nor agreeable company. One must simply be diplomatic with them until one is relieved of them. Nevertheless, observing such a person may bring great benefit if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the ability to see it. You see in his vices. So even this individual, right, who he's saying is just an illness. So you have the first one who is nourishment. These are the types of people who you're around. You're constantly taking from them that which is going to be beneficial from you. So you should just eat as much as you can. The second is kind of like medicine. You take it when you need it and you don't always need it, right? And the third is just straight poison or an illness. But he's saying even in these people, there could be benefit. Why? Because observing such a person may bring great benefit if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the ability to see it, i.e. you see in his vices and in his low states what you find repugnant, and so you avoid these states. So you see bad qualities in these individuals, and you're still able to benefit from them. How? By making a pact with yourself that what I see from that individual, I'm not going to do myself. I'm going to stay away from it. Indeed, the felicitous one is he who takes a warning from others, and the believer is the mirror of his fellow believer. It was said to Jesus, alayhi wa ala nabiyyina sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, who refined your character? Man addabaka? Who refined your character? And so he said, ما أدبني أحد ولكن رأيت جهل الجاهل فتجنبته. No one refined my character. I rather saw the poor behavior of the ignorant person and I avoided it. Indeed, he, may Allah send blessings and peace upon him and on our Prophet, spoke the truth. For if people were to avoid in themselves what they find reprehensible in others, their characters would be refined without any need of a guide. And this is actually one of the things that Imam Al-Ghazālī is known for. So basically, he's saying, when you think about whether or not you need a spiritual guide or not, he says, well, if you can tell me for sure that any time that you ever see an evil quality out of anyone that you come in contact with, that you swear to yourself and hold true to that swear, that you will never commit it, then you don't need a guide. It's really, really difficult, right? But this is ultimately something that you can still benefit from. You see something evil from someone else, and you commit yourself to making sure that you never fall into that evil. Al-wadhifatu thaniya. Now he goes into the second duty. Okay, so he gives you kind of a good treatment and some insight as to the types of qualities that we should look for in a friend, and the things obviously that we shouldn't be, we should sort of pay heed to. And then now he's going to talk about, well, once you find those friends, what is your duty towards them? Like, what type of an individual should you be towards these friends of yours? So he says, مراعاة حقوق الصحبة فمهما انعقدت الشركة وانتظمت بينك وبين شريكك الصحبة فعليك حقوق يوجبها عقد الصحبة وفي القيام بها آداب. So to respect and fulfill the rights of companionship, once you enter into a relationship and friendship is established between you and your companion, you're responsible for fulfilling the duties demanded by that bond of friendship. And in fulfilling them, there are certain rules of conduct. وقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مثل الأخوين مثل اليدين تغسل إحداهما الأخرى. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the likeness of two brothers is that of two hands. One washes the other. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam once entered a thick grove of trees and picked up two toothsticks. One was bent and the other was straight. With him was one of his companions, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the straight twig to the companion, keeping the bent one for himself. The companion said, O Messenger of Allah, you are more deserving of the stick than I, i.e. the straight stick than I. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no one spends time in the company of a friend, even for a short time in the day, without being questioned later about his companionship, regarding whether he fulfilled the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or neglected to do so. Like even something as trivial as this. You know, there's two sticks, one's bent, one's straight. He gives the straight one to them. You'll find this in cultures where they've preserved this prophetic legacy. You know, there's two pieces of chicken. One's a little bit bigger and juicier. One's kind of like, you're not really sure if it's chicken or not, right? What do? You take the one that you're not really sure of and you give your friend, the person that, you know, you've befriended, the better piece. And so on and so forth. You can find a variety of different things that this would apply to. This is the kind of character quality that we're trying to inculcate. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no two friends share each other's company except that the kinder and more caring of the two toward the other is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This should be like, you know, on our wall here at the Majlis. No two friends share each other's company except that the kinder and more caring of the two toward the other is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it starts with us just getting it right within ourselves. And then we begin to impact those around us, and then those around us begin to impact those around them, so on and so forth. And then before you know it, that quality is there. And like I said before, and I've heard this from others, these things are not things that are like lost on us, right? I mean, it's not like I'm saying something that we would be like, oh, I've never heard this before. I've never seen this before. No, I guarantee everybody in this room has seen this in homes of your families and your, distant relatives and friends. And anytime that you invite someone over to your home, you're probably doing all of these things. And what's interesting is that our community, by and large, understands all of that. But it seems like there's always a disconnect in relationship to when we move outside of the home and go into these public spaces. So is the masjid like that? Our community spaces like that? And this, again, it's not me like trying to bash on the masjid. I love the masjids. We need the masjids. We need to support the masjids. We need to be at the masjids. Like, this is something that I'm saying and knowing that this has to be in the masjid. But is it? And why? Ultimately, it's because we've lost this. We've lost our understanding of this. When somebody comes over your home, you treat them with all of these character qualities. We need to be able to have that same sort of impetus or drive within us when we're in our public spaces as well. That's all I'll say about that. The etiquette of friendship, adab al-suhbah. So now he's going to go through a lot of the different adab, the etiquettes per se. So he says, al-itharu bil-mali fa in lam yakun hadha fayabdulu al-fadl min al-mali 'inda al-haja. So the etiquette of friendship is to give your friend preference in your wealth, and if you can't do this, then to give freely of your surplus wealth when he's in need of it, right? This is the story that I was telling you. To provide swift assistance when he's in need, in person and without his having to request it. To keep his secrets, to conceal his faults, not to pass on people's criticisms of him that would upset him. Don't text your friend or call your friend and be like, hey, did you hear about what these people are saying about you? It's fine, right? He doesn't need to know that. And to pass on people's praise of him that would please him. You see the difference, right? To pay full attention when he speaks to you, not to pick apart his words in argumentation, to call him by the names that he likes the most, to praise him for what you know of his praiseworthy traits, to thank him for the favors he does for you, to defend him in his absence from all infringements upon his honor as you would defend yourself, to give him advice with gentleness and by subtle hints if he needs it. And this is something that, again, should be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, you want to be subtle and you want to be wise and caring and loving in the way that you pass on any advice to your friends. But sometimes some people don't like this. They want you to like be very direct with them. So this is also a type of wisdom, like knowing your friend, knowing if your friend wants it direct or if they want it, in a way of gentleness and kindness. And again, like nothing, as the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing that accompanies gentleness and kindness, can entails anything other than beauty, right? And an acceptance in the way that the people receive it. And the opposite is also true, that ugliness does not accompany anything except that it becomes harsh in the way that people receive it. So the idea here is to always bring about any type of advice that you're giving to someone in the most beautiful of way that you can. And gentleness and kindness is always going to be an aid to that. To pardon his slips and his errors, not to censor him, to pray for him in your ritual prayers during his life and after his death, to remain loyal to his family and his relatives after his death, to choose to make things easy for him by not burdening him with any of your own needs, so as to keep his heart free from your concerns, to express joy at all the happy occasions in his life and sadness at all calamities that afflict him, to be in your innermost heart just as you appear outwardly, so that you're truly sincere in your love for him, in private and in public, to be the one who initiates the greeting of peace when you meet him. This is big. Like, you saw me, right? Just say Assalamu alaikum. And when you're in a situation like that, break it. you be the one to break it. You go say salam alaikum to that individual. You know that they saw you and the whole kind of like back and forth thing that happens there, and you know that just the ego is involved in the madness. Break the ego. You be the one to always break the ego. Trust me, it'll never let you down. To make room for him to sit in a gathering, to come out of the house to welcome him, to see him off when he leaves, to keep quiet while he's talking until he finishes, and to refrain from interrupting him. So then he says, وَعَلَى الْجُمْلَةِ فَيُعَامِلُهُ بِمَا يُحِبُّ لِنَفْسِهِ أَنْ يُعَامِلُ بِهِ. So in short, you should treat your friend exactly as you would like to be treated. For truly the brotherhood of a person who does not love for his brother what he loves for himself is mere hypocrisy, and will have evil consequences for him both in this world and the hereafter. So فهذا أدابك في حق العوام المجهولين وفي حق الأصدقاء المؤاخين. And so these are the courtesies or the etiquettes due to people in general that you don't know, and to those close friends who are your brothers. Right? Ultimately, what you're trying to inculcate here, and I was in a gathering in DC this past weekend, and this came out more than once, and so I think it's really important that we share. What does this really look like? What does it really taste like? I can tell you this much. If you're a parent, you'll know this really well. And if you have parents, you can get a glimpse of it. When you look at your child, and they look back at you and they realize the way that you're looking at them, intuitively, it's almost axiomatic. Like they're very aware that you have an immense amount of love for them. Okay? That's something that is known to that individual right off the bat. Like it's there. What we're trying to inculcate as individuals is to be able to look at every single person that way. And I'll tell you that I've been blessed to have people in my life that I have seen this from myself. Like I know that when they look at me, they're looking at me with the exact same love and care and concern and wanting good that they would their own child. And it's really amazing to have someone see you like that. Like it can change your whole life. And that's what they say. Like there's another that someone can give you changes your whole life. Why? Because they look at you and you're very aware that someone really cares, which then allows you to build love in yourself and then to give that off to other people as well. So ultimately, everything that I've said can be summed up as that. You're really trying to inculcate love in your heart in as much as you then are able to see people and they are affected by simply you seeing them and wanting good for them. All right, I'm going to try to finish here. We'll see how we can do. I may skip around a little bit. The third category is that of acquaintances. So now we talked about friends, we talked about people we don't know. The last category are the acquaintances. Be cautious of them, because you will not encounter antagonism except from people that you are acquainted with. A true friend will help you, and someone you don't know at all will not trouble you. All the animosity you encounter then will come from your acquaintances, who express their friendship only with their tongues. You should therefore limit your acquaintances as much as possible. If you have to socialize with acquaintances in a school, the central mosque, the local mosque, the market, or in the city, you must not belittle any of them, for you do not know, they may be better than you. At the same time, you must not look at them with an eye of reverence because of their position in this world, as this could ruin you. In the sight of Allah, this world, together with everything in it, is small and insignificant. Whenever your heart regards as great the people of worldliness, you have declined in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically he's saying, first and foremost, it's the people that you have these relationships with that are not really close to you, but that you know one another, where in which it seems like there's a variable there that allows for misunderstandings to constantly take place. And as a result of which, what you're going to find is that these are the relationships that breed the most animosity and that you may have the most difficult time with, generally speaking. So he's saying, if you have to socialize with these individuals, then treat them well. Don't belittle them. Don't think better of yourself than them. No, nothing of the sort. And at the same time, he says, don't go to the opposite extreme, where in which you regard them insofar as their position in this world as the barometer by which you engage that relationship. So if they're really, really wealthy and really, really popular and really, really famous, you want to be around them. And if they're not, then you don't want to be around them. And so this becomes obviously one of the things that, we could spend a lot of time on in relationship to how community settings especially seem to elevate certain people and, downplay other things. But what Imam Al-Ghazālī is really saying here is, if you're a person of religion, if you're a person who's taking the spiritual path seriously, okay, then don't sell that for these worldly measures, where in which people recognize that, this guy who's on the spiritual tip and takes religion really, really serious, basically does whatever it is that I tell him to do because I have 200,000 people on Twitter. Because what does that make you look like? And more importantly, what does that make your religion look like? Basically, it makes your religion look like it's something that's willing to sell itself to make a buck or two or to get some fame or whatever the case may be. You must take care not to offer them your religion in order to attain what they have of this world. No one ever does so without being diminished in their eyes and, moreover, ending up deprived of what they have. And I'll always see this. People have oftentimes questions around how they should engage in certain work settings or with people where they may be asked to do certain things that they feel like, from a religious perspective, is not going to sit well with them. Well, what should I do? Should I tell this person they're my boss or they're someone really, really important? And there's a lot of nuance here, but ultimately, yeah, you should tell them. I've never seen a situation where in which someone took a principled stance and the people who they had to give that position towards didn't respect them as a result of which. They may have actually caused problems. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Sometimes it does. But more often than not, you will find that these individuals who you had to be very principled with in terms of your stance will respect you because of it. And at the end of the day, they recognize that, Muhammad, when it comes to his religion, Muhammad's the real deal. Like, this stuff is not a joke to him. And we had a conference the other day, last week, and there were these individuals in the room who were video recording, and they were not Muslims. And they saw us like for 8 hours a day, for 3 days, talking just straight theology all day long. One of the guys came up to me afterwards and he was like, "Can I ask you something, man? Like, no offense, right? But I was like, yeah, sure, no problem." He's like, "You guys take your religion like really serious, man." And I was like, yeah, we kind of do. He was like, no, really. Like, I feel like if I had one of these conversations around religion in the community that I came from, they definitely would not have been as principled as you all are, making sure that you're honestly reading the texts and like being honest with the translations and all of that. Like, we would spend like an hour trying to get one word right. It's like, yeah. But he saw it and he recognized that when it comes to Islam, these Muslims, when they do work, they do it and they really do it, right? And that's what we want ultimately. We're with really good people. I would say that that's the reason why. Do not relax and let your guard down with them when they honor you, and be wary of them when they praise you to your face or show affection to you. If you were to look into the reality of the situation, you would find that only 1 in 100 of them is sincere. Don't expect them to treat you the same way in private as they do in public. Don't be surprised if they slander you in absence. Don't get angry with them, because if you are fair and honest, you'll find that you act the same way, even with your friends and your relatives. Indeed, even with your teachers and your parents, for you mention about them in their absence what you do not say to their faces. So basically he's saying, look, these things that you're going to see from them and the expectations that you hold other people to, be easy. You're not perfect as well. Do not covet their money or status or hope for their support. The covetous person in most cases fails in the end to get what he wanted, and in the present is most certainly humiliated. If you ask one of your acquaintances to do something for you and he does it, thank Allah and thank the person too. And if he does not manage to do it, then don't rebuke him or complain about it, lest enmity develop. Rather, be like the believer seeking out excuses for his brother, and not like the hypocrite who searches for faults. Say, perhaps he was unable to do it for some reason that I'm unaware of. And this is something that we really need to inculcate in our communities as well. Husn al-dhan. If somebody looks at you wrong, you immediately assume like, this guy hates me and I hate him. No, maybe he just like had a phone call in which something was dropped on him that he's like trying to parse right now in his head and he can't believe it. Don't always go to how this affects me personally. When you begin to see other people in that light, this also makes it a lot easier for you to do. Do not admonish any of them unless you first see in him a willingness to accept it, lest he refuse to hear it from you and turn against you. If one of them has made a mistake in some matter and arrogantly refuses to take advice from anyone, do not teach them, for they may derive benefit from your knowledge and yet become your enemy, except when they have committed an act of disobedience and ignorance, in which case you should remind them of the truth gently without being harsh. So a lot that could be extracted from that, but I'm going to finish it. If you see that they have done you an act of generosity or goodness, thank Allah who has caused them to love you. But if you see something malicious from them, leave them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek his protection from their harm and do not censor them, nor say to them, don't you know who I am? Or I'm so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, or I'm a very knowledgeable person. This is the speech of fools. And the most foolish person is one who deems himself upright and praises himself. You should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not give them power over you except of some sin you committed in the past. So seek Allah's forgiveness for your sin and realize that it's punishment for you from him. There's a story of, they were trying to make sense of like two individuals that they knew had a lot of knowledge. Which one was really sort of an inheritor of the prophetic way? So they invited both of them and they said, you know what? We'll see the way that they act when we don't give them any attention. So one of them came in, and this individual had like the whole garb on, the thing, and he walks into the room and nobody's paying him any attention. He gets really, really mad. He's, what is this? He goes up to the front and he's like, I can't believe how I've been treated. Don't you know who I am? Yada, yada, yada. And it became very apparent to them that, there's a flaw here in this guy. They invited the other person came in and he was wearing something nice, but not like over and above. Nobody paid him any attention. And so he just sat in the back with his sibha the entire time. And so at the end of the gathering, they came up to him and they said, we invited you, we didn't pay you any attention. We were wondering why you didn't say anything to us. He said, I thought I did something. And so I was in the back just making istighfar for what I did. That's the difference. That's the real inheritor of the prophetic way. Be among them as one who hears the true things they say and turns a deaf ear to their falsehoods, one who speaks about their good qualities and remains silent about their shortcomings. Be wary of associating with the pseudo-jurists of your time, especially those who busy themselves with differences of opinion and disputation, for they will just be waiting for a disastrous turn of fortune to strike you out of envy. We've seen this, and we continue to see this. They will make conclusive judgments about you based on negative supposition, and will wink at one another about you behind your back. If you keep their company, they take account of every slip, then confront you with them all when they are angry or during a debate. They do not help you when you stumble. They don't forgive you when you slip. They don't cover up your faults when you may have done anything. They take you to account over the most trivial, insignificant things and envy you over every blessing, great or small. They incite your brothers against you by tale-bearing, gossiping, and false accusation. If they seem pleased with you outwardly, it's all flattery. If they get angry, they reveal a deep inward resentment, and they are externally clothed, but within they are wolves. He's going in on these people, right? This is the conclusion one comes to about them after observing the majority of them, except those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects. To keep their company is to incur loss, and close association with them close association with them leads to utter failure. If this is the judgment of one who affects friendship outwardly, what then of one who openly shows enmity to you? Take the advice of the one who says, and so he goes through now some of these lines of poetry that, inshallah, I'll ask you all to go back to at a certain point. One more page. And be as some of the sages have said, meet your friend and your enemy with the same face, one of contentment, neither lowering yourself to them in humiliation, nor looking up to them in awe. Have a dignified bearing without arrogance, and show humility without abasement. Take the middle course in all your matters, because both extremes in any matter are blameworthy. Do not look around from side to side with self-conceit, nor constantly glance behind you. Do not stop and talk to every group you come across. And if you do sit down with them, do not sit in a restless manner. Make sure you avoid clasping your fingers together, playing with your beard or ring, picking your teeth, putting your finger up your nose, a lot of spitting or clearing your throat, swatting flies away from your face, and too much stretching or yawning, whether in front of people, in the ritual prayer, or elsewhere. Like, these are things that you do, when you're alone. Hopefully not picking your nose, but when you're alone, like, don't do the kinds of things that you would do alone in public, is what he's trying to say, right? Like, the human being should have more dignity than that. When you're in public, there's a certain way that you should sit and a certain way that you should be with people, and this is something that we should uphold. Rather, let the way you sit be quiet and calm, and your speech be orderly and thought out well. Pay proper attention to the good conversation of the one speaking to you without showing exaggerated amazement, and do not ask him to repeat himself. Remain silent when people are joking and telling stories. Do not speak about how proud you are of your children, your poetry, your mode of expression, your literary work, or other matters personal to you. Don't sit and talk about yourself and all your achievements and everything that you're, been blessed with. Do not go to great lengths to dress yourself up as a woman does, nor let yourself be unkempt and unruly like a slave. Avoid wearing too much kuhl or being extravagant in your use of oil. Do not insist upon having your needs met. Do not encourage anyone else to commit oppression. Do not inform your spouse or children, let alone anyone else, of the amount of wealth that you would hold. So here he's trying to say, people that hold a lot of wealth, other people shouldn't know how much wealth they have. Like, it's not something that should be like public, even though nowadays it's like that's all people talk about. And whether or not the idea of like your spouse not knowing, here he's saying, like, even if both of you had a joint account or something like that, like, nobody should know outside of both of you how much is actually in that account, like how much is you actually have. I remember growing up, like, you don't know how much people make. Even those that you are very aware make a lot of money, or at least a lot more money than you yourself make or your family make. But at the same time, you still engage them. They're still like, it's not something that's as public as it is today, where in which everybody's in everybody's business and trying to figure out like how much everybody has and whatnot. Why? Because ultimately that breeds jealousy and envy and the ain, right? This hasad that then, is afflicting people and whatnot. There's no need for all of that. In arguments with others, guard against your own ignorance and rashness. Consider well your points before you make them. Do not gesticulate too much. Keep turning around to look at those behind you or fall to your knees. Speak only when your anger has abated. This is a very important point. You're angry, don't speak. Wait until it's gone. If the ruler tries to befriend you and bring you close, be with him as you would the sharp edge of a spearhead. Beware of the fair weather friend, for he is the worst of enemies. And do not value your wealth more than your honor. That's a beautiful line. Do not value your wealth more than your honor. So now he closes this beautiful book. فَهَذَا الْقَدْرُ يَا فَتَى تَكْفِيكَ فِي بِدَايَةِ الْهِدَايَةِ. This amount of advice should be enough for you, dear young one, at the beginning of the path of guidance. Experiment with it on yourself. It has 3 sections: a section on acting in obedience to Allah, a section on refraining from disobedience, and a section on relationships with creation. Taken together, these 3 elements fully encompass the servant's interactions with the Creator and his creation. If you see it relevant to you and you find your heart inclining towards it and desiring to act upon it, then know that you are a servant whose heart Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has illuminated with true faith and whose breast has been expanded to accept it. And be absolutely certain that this beginning has an end. And behind it are spiritual secrets, depths of understanding, types of knowledge, and unveilings. This is the progression. And all of this we can expand on much, much more. But this is ultimately what Imam Al-Ghazālī is trying to get us to. He's trying to say, look, everything that I have taught in this text ultimately goes into the idea that there's much more to the knowledge that you assume this religion has than you even think that it has. And there are stages. And once you get to the end stage, there's an unveiling wherein which what you may have rationally been aware of or cognizant of becomes something that you are now experientially tasting and seeing and engaging. We have explained these matters in the revival of the religious sciences, the Ihya Ulumuddin, so make an effort to study it. Everything that I said in this book, if you felt like you heard it and you're good with it and you want to do it and you want to practice it and you really want to take on this path, then know that inside of yourself is real faith. And there is nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put there. Cultivate it and continue to walk down this path, because it will lead you to an end wherein which these unveilings will take place. If, on the other hand, you find that your lower self considers these tasks too burdensome and regard this kind of knowledge as too much trouble, asking you, how will this type of knowledge benefit you in the gatherings of scholars? When will it cause you to excel among your colleagues and peers? Like, all of this now becomes, how is this knowledge going to benefit me? Am I going to get to hang out with all these really cool people? Am I going to have this really amazing platform? I'm going to get all these followers. When will it cause you to excel among your colleagues and peers? How will it raise your status in the meetings of leaders and ministers? How will it afford you connections with noteworthy figures, higher earnings, and positions of rank in endowments or in legal courts? Know then that Satan has misguided you and caused you to forget your destiny, which is to return to Allah and your final abode in the hereafter. So find a devil like yourself to teach you what you think will bring you to your goal. I mean, it's very harsh. This is very harsh. We'll come back to it. And know with certainty that any dominion you may have in your immediate locality, let alone in your town or country, will never be without troubles. Moreover, in exchange, you will lose the everlasting dominion and eternal bliss in the proximity of the Lord of the worlds. He is enough for us and the best of patrons. هو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah. So that's the end. Imam Al-Ghazālī here gives us a basic breakdown of everything that was in this book. And he basically says to us, look, if you find yourself inclining towards what it is that I've said and feeling like this is true and that you want to be a part of it, then you're on the right path. Keep going. And if you feel like the things that you've heard in this book are things that you detest, you don't like, and you're, at odds with, and that's where he goes really hard. He says, basically, know that you're demonic, so go find demonic friends and whatnot. I.e., what he's saying here is, know that the reasons why you're trying to do what it is you're trying to do in seeking secret knowledge has defects, and they're really problematic, in the sense that you're going to end up learning all of these things, and it's going to be a means for your destruction in the hereafter, not a means for you getting to Jannah, which is ultimately the point, i.e., to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't use this religion against yourself. Use this religion as a means to bring you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't get deterred in that journey. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, to give us knowledge that benefits us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow this reading to be something that we take with us and that makes us better human beings. It allows us to benefit our families and our communities and our loved ones. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put light in the grave of Imam Al-Ghazālī, to allow this work to be something that is put on his scale of good deeds بإذن الله تعالى. اللهم لك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد كالذي نقول وخير مما نقول ولك الحمد كالذي تقول ولك الحمد على كل حال. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم استرنا بسترك الجميل. اللهم استرنا بسترك الجميل. اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. اللهم يا الله يا الله يا الله بجاه أسماء الله وصفات الله ورسل الله وأنبياء الله والصالحين من عباد الله. اللهم اقضِ حوائجنا ظاهرا وباطنا. نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم ارزقنا حسن الخاتمة. اللهم ارزقنا حسن الخاتمة. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. يا عالم السر منا لا تهتك الستر عنا وعافنا واعف عنا وكلنا حيث كنا. اللهم أيقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من الغفلة عنك واجعل آخر كلامنا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله كما يليق بكماله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله كل خير. Alhamdulillah, I wanted to get through the text because next week, right? Yeah. We'll be starting something else. We'll be in, inshallah, Allah gives us life, the month of Ramadan. كل عام وأنتم بخير. You know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in this Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow this Ramadan to be the best of Ramadans that we have experienced in our lives, and you know, allow this to be a means by which the Ummah is united, in which the world is united, in which forgiveness is rain manifest upon everything, and mercy, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And inshallah, look out for the things that are happening here at the Majlis throughout the month of Ramadan, inshallah. Any questions or comments? Or if not, you can, I know that we went over, so you can also just go if need be. The question here says, is that the reason they say to close the Quran, to not let the shaitan read the Quran? I don't know what that question is in regards to. Yeah.
I had a question, because when discussing like relationships, especially when it was talking about, you know, who you should be around and so forth, ever since coming to Islam, I have a difficulty of, you know, trying to balance that mentality. Alhamdulillah, like I was put in an environment where I was surrounded by Muslims, and Muslims that alhamdulillah kept me learning and growing. But then going back home to my family who are not Muslim, and kind of seeing the mentality of like, I want to be with my family, around my family because they're family. But I can't imagine raising my kids around my family because of, you know, the lifestyles they live, because they're not Muslim and they abide by different things. And so at times I just find it hard to just socialize them, you know, because of that. So, you know, and reading this section, I was like, you know, alhamdulillah, it's a little bit easier for like the friendship level for me, but just that family level, I feel like it's
yeah. Well, you want to finish that thought? I mean, what's maybe the question that was there?
I think the biggest thing is just like how to, because if we're supposed to choose like who we are supposed to be around wisely, because sometimes I find it difficult to be around my family because even though they know like my stances on things and like what my personal side, they still ask me to engage in things that I
You don't want to.
on a routine basis, and that's what they do together. That's how they socialize. But it's also just like, how do I still engage with them as family, but also still try not to just, you know, be like, okay, I'm gonna hang around them and be okay with what they're saying and the things that they want to be involved in.
Yeah, it's very difficult. But know that there's a balance to it as well. I mean, there may be certain times in which, because you can recognize where you're at, you know that the right thing is to completely disconnect from people. And that happens particularly in the beginning of one's journey, right? Like if the people that you are hanging around are not really people that are about deen and all of these types of things, then you know very well that if I'm trying to be on my deen, the friends that I have are not really going to help me fulfill that.
Right.
And I'm not really in a place where in which I can fend off the different types of blows that are going to come from them. And so as a result, I have to peace out, right? And you may come back at a certain point where in which, you know, now you feel like you're a bit more solidified in who you are and the community that you have and the people that are around you. And you have a comfort level and a kind of resilience to be able to take on those things then, right? So know that everybody's at different stages in their life. And so you have to kind of gauge within yourself, where are you? Obviously, raising children brings on a whole number of other issues. But I'll also say that the answer cannot also be the opposite extreme, which is, you know, particularly with family members, that these people are just like cut out of my life completely. Like that can't be the way. And we've seen that as well, where people, you know, come to religion, they kind of take on this like mindset that's quite one-dimensional. And so everything in their past they run from. That's also kind of like hiding from yourself in a sense. Like you don't actually want to confront the issue. So, you know, it's going to take some time, and that obviously is going to be a balancing act. And you should know that you're going to make some mistakes and you're going to learn from those mistakes and you're going to do better. And then to cut yourself a lot of slack, right, when it comes to this as well. And that going into it with the right intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will carry you through. Know that. And everything that you want ultimately from the people around you, family, friends and whatnot, who aren't really where you are, is going to come from the love that you show them. You know, one of my teachers said that suhbah is the way to really break into people who you want to either have shift their lifestyle or at least be a little bit more, you know, accommodating, right, to the types of things that you're doing. That can only be done by companionship, suhbah, like being with these people as much as you can, as much as you're able to. And to constantly kind of nudge in a very loving and gentle way. He said, if, you know, we took a chisel, right, and I tried to chisel something into this glass, I would have to do it really delicately, but with a lot of taps, right? If I tried to hit it way too hard, it shatters. But if it's really small and very repetitive movements, eventually you'll begin to see that I'm actually imprinting something into this glass. That's how you want to be with these people. Because they will be affected. I mean, we are affected by the people that were around, as Imam Al-Ghazālī is saying. So even you doing the type of work that you're doing, when you're around people, it's going to have an impact on them. We often think about it from the opposite side. But there's a reciprocal nature to that. So, inshallah. Yeah, cool. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Even though I know here for a lot of this.
That's good.
So what you're talking about in terms of like letting go of things that like that don't serve us and people that might not be like helping us go on our path to the deen. What if like that ends up being like fellow Muslims? How are we supposed to like build community with people who we feel like the Muslims around us aren't the best of influences in terms of, especially just for youth and people growing up with that. How do we foster community? But
yeah, again, it's a balancing act. I mean, I think that these kinds of things have to be resolved on the top level. Like if, you know, the people that are in charge are the people that you're talking about, then, you know, that venture is doomed to just to be like destroyed. But if it's people who are, you know, a part of like just the community space itself, I would say that there's much more ability to accommodate, because eventually, given a particular culture that has been created, if you've done it properly, people will end up following suit. Like you'll see that they're going to use the same words that you're using, and they'll start doing the same things that you're doing, and that's what Imam Al-Ghazālī means when he says that, you know, by our nature we are imitating. We get into certain spaces, and eventually, over time, we'll end up imitating a lot of the people in those spaces. I mean, it's very interesting, actually. I was with a bunch of students from a variety of different backgrounds and traditions. It's like different teachers, right? And you can tell that the way that they're acting is almost a carbon copy of what you would expect their teachers to be doing. So you can sort of see the tradition that they're taking from. And you kind of see it in yourself. Like, you know that you're also doing that when it comes to the way that you're imbibing what your teachers have taught and the way that they speak and they carry themselves and so on and so forth. So, you know, creating that culture within these spaces is going to be extremely important. If you have that, then you can be much more accommodating to those kinds of things. If not, then you want to be a little bit more selective as to, you know, who you let in and who you don't let in from the get-go. People that are going to be a bad role models in a certain space, you want to make sure that you're aware. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, next week. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Good to see everybody. We'll end here, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.